Okay, so the way we are going to start our essays is with a hook. After you've come up with a title which talks about your theme from names, nombres, you are going to want to start your essay with a hook. The hook of the story is important because we want to hook the reader in. We want them to pay attention to what we've written. We want them to want to know what we're talking about. Because if they don't, they're not going to want to read the essay. So, something to consider. Who is your audience? Who is going to be listening to / reading your essay? Well, the answer to that is your teacher. So, obviously, your teacher knows the story. However, you do want to entice us with something interesting. All right, now that I've explained a little bit about hook, you guys are going to be looking at the worksheet that you are filling out, the theme worksheet that is your assignment and your end goal for this Google Slides assignment. So we have the worksheet here. Again, you can use read and write if you would like. And by this point, you should have watched the bad seed example and read / watched through the names nombres again. I just want you guys to understand that you are using both of those texts in this case. So we are moving forward with our examples for hook. So for the hook statement of your essay, in my case, I'm going to be using the bad seed as my example. You guys are going to be using names nombres for your theme worksheet. This one is mine. I'm going to be using the bad seed because we've talked about it. So our first option for the hook is asking a question. So in this case, I have the question, have you ever heard of the phrase bad seed? This is something that gets your reader interested, makes them think about the topic. In this case, they're thinking about the term bad seed and whether or not they've heard it. The downside to this is when you ask the question, you probably should mention the question and maybe the answer. So I could say something after this, like a bad seed is this, or something along the lines of that. I do need to explain the question and why I kind of stated it. So the answer, the term bad seed refers to someone who hasn't made the best decisions. If I can spell. Okay, so that could be a good example of the hook and the answer. It is really good to just start with I would suggest using the ask a question because it's not the simplest, but it is something that is kind of cool and it does make your reader think. Something else that you could do instead of the question would be a strong statement. In this case, I have people who have made bad decisions often have reputations. This would be a strong enough statement. I don't need a second sentence after this because it's a strong enough statement. I would just move into the next section. So you could choose to use the strong statement as your hook. Our final example for the bad seed and the other option you have for the hook is to tell a story or write about a scenario. In this case, I have written that I have an interesting past. I don't remember all of it, but I know that it has impacted who I am today. This is a personal story. I'm talking about me. Something you can talk about yourself when you're talking about a literary essay. You don't have to, when you're in high school, you probably won't be using first person with the literary essay, but for our sake, you are allowed to tell a personal story. It just has to be a little bit shorter because of the introductory paragraph is a little bit longer. So it does have to be 1 or 2 sentences. It doesn't have to be like 3 or 4. So you'd have to be able to tell your story scenario very quickly. In this case, I do it in 2 sentences. It is a little bit trickier to do the tell a story scenario unless you're like going to explain it a little bit more. This kind of is a little bit more advanced and it takes a little bit longer to get kind of used to and maybe explain a little bit more. If you go into 3 sentences with the tell a story, I'm not going to like take off points. But I do think like if you want a challenge, maybe you could do the tell a story or scenario. But again, if you have questions on this one, you can ask me for that particular one or any of these. You can ask me or Ms. Pollock. I will be here for you guys to ask questions. Email me if we're not in class. So now that I've given you kind of a rundown of examples and options for the hook, with using the bad seed, I want you to take the skills and take these options, pick which one you feel the most comfortable writing for your hook, either asking a question, making a strong statement, or telling a story slash scenario. I want you to pick the one you feel comfortable with, and then I want you to write the hook in your theme worksheet for your assignment in Schoology. I want you to do that for names nombres. I'm not going to give you the examples that I have for names nombres, but if you really do get stuck, please ask me. But I do want you to just try and think for yourself for a little bit. And if you do really get stuck, email me. But you could think, okay, what question could I ask myself about names nombres that would make it interesting? Or what statement could I make about the title names nombres maybe? Or even what kind of story could I talk about for maybe my name or the importance of a name? Maybe something like that for my hooks. So now go ahead and take some time and write the hook for your literary essay using names nombres.